The number 800 is why you overpaid. Not the number on your invoice, the number inside the architecture of every premium electric vehicle you've been told represents the standard, 800 volts. That number is the ceiling, and the companies charging you $100,000 for it built the ceiling themselves. They sold you the room. They didn't tell you someone else already built the building above it. The number is 1,000. 1,000 volts, and before you dismiss that as a spec sheet detail, understand what it physically means, not as a marketing promise, but as a consequence of real engineering. At higher voltage, you move the same power with less current. Less current means less heat. Less heat means the system doesn't need to protect itself by pulling back power when you actually need it. That's not a small improvement. That's a different category of vehicle. The ceiling was built to keep you inside. Because here's what they never told you about every major premium electric SUV sold in the United States. Under sustained load, real driving, mountain grades, repeated acceleration, highway speed, and summer heat, the battery management system detects thermal buildup and starts reducing power. It's called thermal throttling. It happens invisibly. The car that performed in every press test, the one that did 0 to 60 in the brochure time, becomes a slower, more limited machine the moment conditions move outside a controlled environment. That limitation isn't a software glitch. It isn't a manufacturing defect. It's a consequence of physics built into the voltage architecture. And the companies that built it knew. You paid for the performance. You got the disclaimer they buried in engineering language. Every premium EV throttles. They never said that. The vehicle is the Leapmotor D19, 3 electric motors, 724 horsepower, nearly 7,000 pounds, 0 to 60 in approximately 3 seconds. Those numbers cannot coexist. They have never coexisted at this price point. Not because engineering didn't allow it, but because the thermal math of 800-volt architecture made it physically impossible to sustain without throttling. 3 motors pushing 3 tons generates heat. At 800 volts, that heat is a management problem that limits what the system delivers under pressure. At 1,000 volts, the current required to produce the same output is structurally lower. The heat generated is structurally reduced. The throttling that would normally activate under this load doesn't appear. Full power. Not for a press event lap, not for a controlled demonstration. Continuously. That's not an improvement over the Rivian R1S. That's not a stronger version of the Cadillac Escalade IQ. That's a different answer to the same question, and it makes the existing answer look like the first attempt. This doesn't compete, it ends the argument. Now the battery, because this is where the contradiction goes deeper. Conventional EV design treats the battery pack as a module, a separate assembly that sits inside the vehicle structure. The structure is built, then the battery goes in. The battery is cargo. Cell-to-chassis integration eliminates that distinction at the root. The cells are fused directly into the structural floor. The cells aren't cargo inside a chassis. The cells are the chassis. The floor that transfers load, resists torsion, and defines the rigidity of the entire vehicle is the battery itself. This removes the weight penalty of a redundant structural layer. It reduces the height of the floor battery assembly. It produces a platform that is stiffer than conventional luxury SUV architecture, vehicles that weigh significantly less and cost significantly more. 3 tons, maximum rigidity. More mass, less flex. Every variable that should compound in the wrong direction, reversed. 2 systems combined into one. The one wins. That makes every separately mounted battery module in current Western EV production structurally obsolete. Every kilogram added to reinforce a chassis that could have been the battery. Every engineering compromise paid to maintain a separation that this architecture eliminates. Not improved, not updated, replaced by a simpler approach that outperforms in every dimension that matters to an actual buyer. You've been paying for two systems. This is one system that beats both. And here's where the discomfort moves from engineering into something harder to accept. Stellantis, the holding company that controls Jeep, Ram, Dodge, Chrysler, Fiat, Peugeot, and 9 other brands, invested over $1 billion for a 20% stake in Leapmotor. With that investment came something more strategically significant than equity: exclusive distribution rights for all Leapmotor vehicles in every market outside China. Stellantis doesn't just own a financial position in the company that built this car. Stellantis controls the door through which this car enters the world. They bought the lock, not the key. Think carefully about the incentive structure that creates. Stellantis generates revenue selling vehicles at Western price points. The D19 sells in China at the equivalent of a mid-trim American crossover, not a luxury SUV, not a performance vehicle, not anything in the premium tier, the category below. If the D19 arrives in American markets at that price, it doesn't compete with Stellantis' entry-level offerings. It makes Stellantis' top-tier vehicles impossible to justify on engineering grounds. The company that controls distribution has maximum financial incentive to manage the pace of that distribution, to slow it, to sequence it, to time it around its own portfolio restructuring, not around market demand. This is not speculation about intentions. This is how markets function when established players acquire disruptive technology. The acquisition is the containment strategy. The investment isn't in acceleration. The investment is in control. This doesn't improve the market. It exposes who owns the gate. The gatekeeper profits from the wait. Let's talk about the range extender, because it doesn't improve an existing category. It eliminates the argument that made that category necessary. Plug-in hybrids, vehicles that Toyota, Ford, and every Stellantis brand spent years positioning as the smart bridge between combustion and pure electric. They maintain a mechanical connection between the combustion engine and the drive wheels. That connection is structural: transmission, drive shaft, differential, all in mechanical series with the engine at all times. They generate friction. They add weight that serves no purpose when the vehicle operates on electricity alone. They require service intervals that a purely electric drivetrain doesn't need. The complexity of the plug-in hybrid was sold as sophistication. It was actually the cost of preserving familiar architecture when that architecture could no longer be sold without electrification bolted onto it. The D19's range extender cuts that connection at the root. The combustion engine in this vehicle doesn't touch a single wheel. It generates electricity. That is its only function. It operates at maximum thermal efficiency, converts fuel into electrical energy, and routes that energy to the motors. The motors move the wheels. The combustion engine never does. There's no transmission between the engine and the road, no drive shaft connected to combustion output. The result? No practical range ceiling. Not because it carries an enormous battery, but because the generator extends range at full efficiency without the parasitic mechanical loss that reduces efficiency in every mechanically connected hybrid in combustion mode. This doesn't replace the plug-in hybrid. It makes it look like an apology. Every hybrid transmission is unnecessary weight. Now, 300 kilometers of range restored in 15 minutes. That number is a direct consequence of the 1000-volt architecture. High voltage charging means the system accepts energy with lower current. Lower current means less heat during charging. Less heat means the battery is more frequently within the temperature window that permits maximum charge rates without preconditioning. 800-volt systems require thermal preparation before fast charging begins. If the battery is cold from sitting or hot from aggressive driving, maximum charge rate is unavailable until the system preconditions. That step adds time to every fast charge stop. The D19's thermal margin is larger because the architecture produces less heat by design. The 15 minutes isn't a laboratory result under ideal conditions. It's the routine output of a system where the thermal problem was solved at the voltage level, not managed at the software level. Range anxiety was a real response to a real limitation. This removes the physics that created it. One more capability: And this one exposes the distance between what premium pricing claims and what premium engineering actually delivered over the last decade. The D19 ships from the factory with an onboard medical-grade oxygen generation system as standard equipment. Not a package, not an upgrade trim. The system separates nitrogen from ambient air through miniaturized compressors and delivers up to 8 liters of concentrated oxygen directly into the cabin. Blood oxygen saturation stays at 99% regardless of external altitude. Above 10,000 feet, mountain highways, high passes, the kind of terrain where a significant portion of American drivers actually use these vehicles, cognitive performance begins declining without supplemental oxygen. Reaction time increases in ways drivers don't consciously register because the decline is gradual and the baseline shifts with it. Judgment narrows. Fatigue accelerates. These are documented physiological responses, not edge cases, and they occur exactly in the conditions where the vehicle's capability and the driver's ability to use it are simultaneously most demanded. The Land Rover Defender, sold at approximately $100,000 in most Western markets, doesn't have this system. No Western luxury SUV has this system. The category didn't exist at any production price point in Western markets. It exists now, in China, in a vehicle that costs a fraction of what the Defender costs and ships standard. They charged you for leadership. They didn't include the invention. They sold the Summit. This built above it. Here is the complete picture without softening. A 7,000-pound SUV, 724 horsepower, sustained without thermal throttling, 0 to 60 in 3 seconds, 300 kilometers of range restored in 15 minutes, unlimited practical range through a mechanically decoupled combustion generator with no parasitic drivetrain loss. Chassis rigidity achieved through battery integration that outperforms dedicated performance platforms. Factory medical-grade oxygen generation as standard equipment. Sold in China at the price of a mid-trim American crossover. That vehicle exists. It's in production. It's being sold today in the market where it was built. And the entity that controls whether it reaches you is the same one that profits from selling the vehicles it would replace. The tariffs, the import restrictions, the safety certification processes being accelerated in Western regulatory environments, some of those have partial validity. Trade policy isn't always wrong, but the sequence is visible. The engineering gap widens toward China. The technical argument against these vehicles weakens. The regulatory and commercial response intensifies. What that sequence communicates isn't consumer safety protection. It's price structure protection, a structure that can no longer be defended on engineering merit against the comparison from which it's being shielded. You're making purchase decisions inside a market that's being actively managed to delay that comparison. The vehicles that would change what you understand your money can buy are being held at borders controlled by companies whose revenue depends on you not seeing them next to what's being sold to you. The price is not proof of engineering anymore. The architecture decisions that define the D19, 1,000-volt platform, cell-to-chassis integration, mechanically decoupled range extension, factory oxygen generation are not secrets. They're published engineering decisions. They produce measurable results. Engineering decisions that produce measurable results propagate because the alternative is building to an inferior standard in a market where comparison is becoming inevitable. Western manufacturers will adopt these architectures. The timeline is the only variable, and that timeline is determined by how long legacy cost structures can be protected by regulatory barriers rather than accelerated by engineering competition. Every managed month of delay is a month where someone buys a vehicle with a thermal ceiling at a price that assumes no ceiling exists. Every premium SUV sold under the assumption that the price reflects the frontier is a transaction completed inside the gap between what the market permits and what the technology delivers. That gap is not a market failure, it is market design. The market you trusted to show you the best that engineering can deliver already sold its position in the answer before you knew the question existed. This doesn't disrupt the industry. It exposes what the industry built to stop you from knowing.